Good morning, Doc. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, good morning, Ladi. How are you doing over there in Lagos?
Well, we're hanging in there. Thank you very much. I want to start, of course, with economics and the fallout, the economic fallout of this battle ongoing in Ukraine. In the United Kingdom, it appears as if it's, shall I say, new leaders are finding it difficult to get a grasp of the economic situation, particularly the energy crisis. There have been reversals, some level of somersaults, in terms of policy. But how has it been received by the average resident of the UK, do you think?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ladi. There's, I would say, a kind of, policy chaos at the moment here in the United Kingdom. And this has led to, uncertainty as far as the economic stability of the UK is concerned. You will agree with me that before this new government of the UK, led by Liz Truss, came in, there have been a series of issues economically with the high energy costs, inflation already rising, the interest rates being raised by the Bank of England, just to bring some measure of stability. But the midterm economic announcement made by the new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, didn't particularly go well with a lot of the those who run the economy here. And we saw that immediately after his announcement, the value of the pound started depreciating against the US dollar at an all-time high. And there were a lot of meetings. The Conservative Party, the government in power, almost imploded during their conference. And shockingly, the Chancellor had to make a U-turn on the 45p tax rates that he has actually brought in. So, but immediately he made that U-turn, the value of the pound stabilized. And while we were taking that in, there have been some other issues as to some of the new policies that the Chancellor have announced, where they are going to get funding for it, almost about 60 billion pounds. So there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment, and it's not boding well for the UK economy at the moment.
Now, you referenced there 60 billion pounds. That 60 billion pounds, if we put it in context, is just first is for 6 months, and it is money to be used to cap how much households in Britain would pay for energy costs, no matter how expensive they get, to a maximum of £2,500 per month. That is, if it gets to be much more than that, the British government would bear the cost, and that's what that 60 billion is for. And as you pointed out, there are big questions about where it's going to come from. The IMF is reporting that, look, there needs to be a lot of care taken here, that the British Treasury doesn't have that much wiggle room, both in terms of how much fund it has and how much it can access, even by way of borrowing. It had already borrowed so much for COVID-19 and all of that, so there's not much wiggle room. Now, in terms of £2,500, because when we speak to some of the people who live in Britain, even the limit of £2,500 is contentious. There are so many people saying even that they cannot afford.
Yeah, the thing is, the 60 billion pounds is for a whole lot of things, not just for the to cover the energy cap. It's for some of the spending cuts that the PM put in place. So it covers a lot of things within the UK economy. But the energy cap is going to take a large chunk of that. So, but what we are seeing, I think, for most of us who are keen observers of how the UK economy works, what we are seeing is the improper handling of the energy crisis, which is as a direct consequence of this Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I think what most analysts are saying now is that the end game of this whole thing for the UK economy is for the windfall tax to be imposed on the energy company. Because we know, as told us by the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer here in the UK, in the next 2 years, this energy company are going to be making a profit of about 170 billion pounds, which is unexpected profit.
Britain normally is not so open to the shocks of supply because Britain has its own supply of oil and gas largely. But more recently, you know, there has been change in the mix, which is why the whole issue of supply has become critical. Now, but on the street, have you noticed, I mean, we're talking about inflation. There are those who have said that inflation has gone sky high, but we haven't yet seen that at the supermarkets or at the gas pumps and so on, have we? In the case of the UK.
Yeah, we have. The inflation, the prices of all goods and services have gone up. I go to the shop. We all buy things. So, and on the street, you see there's a lot of grumbling and murmuring. So, inflation is really biting. I think the UK inflation figures is so high at the moment. I think since the early 90s, it hasn't been this figure. And that is the reason why the COB, Central Bank of England, has, you know, increased the interest rate about twice already. And as I speak to you, there's even a housing crisis is even brewing because mortgage lenders, they are withdrawing their services from the market. They don't want to, serve people, first-time buyers who want to buy their homes here in the UK. So because at the moment, the mortgage rate is about 6.0 as of yesterday. So it's a spiral, you know, if I want to put it that way.
And that is having political consequences because yesterday I was talking to our correspondent in London, Juliana Olainka, and one of the things that we discussed was the fact that, I mean, under normal circumstances, if everything was okay, the UK is not expected to have an election until about 2024. That's when the next scheduled election should be. But that because of this issue, this economic crisis, and the handling, the perceived handling of it by the Truss government over the last couple of weeks, there are those who are talking. You mentioned Keir Starmer there. Keir Starmer, of course, is driving for elections to happen sooner than 2024, that the British people cannot wait. Then there's the complication with Scotland. Scotland is also trying to get a referendum into the, into the mix at this point. There's the Northern Ireland crisis that came from Brexit, which has not yet, completely been resolved. So there are many issues on which to fight an election. But do you think that the British people themselves would be willing to go to the polls so quickly, knowing that so many other things are happening? The war in Ukraine has not stopped and is not going to stop for the purpose of the British elections.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, the British people, we are election weary. We've had, I think, from David Cameron to trying to remember her name now.
Theresa May.
Theresa May.
You mean Theresa May?
Yeah. To Boris Johnson. This is the fourth prime minister we're having in about 6 years. It's just, we are election weary. People are tired of voting all the time. And the only reason why I think there might be election is that a number of the senior figures in the Conservative Party, the government in power, they are showing a lot of discontent and they are showing it publicly, which is very, very unparliamentary, using the British terminology there. So that, for me, is the fear that we may have an election possibly next year. But if you ask the average British person, we are wary. For Scotland, the matter has gone to court. The Lord Advocate of Scotland was presenting their case yesterday in the court here in the UK. That particular referendum issue is going to be a long, drawn battle. and we are all watching keenly.
In terms of the Northern Ireland one and Brexit, because at the beginning of our conversation, I made reference to the fact that we are, you know, the UK, apart from what it is now doing with reference to Ukraine and the headwinds that have come with that, was coming off Brexit. And then COVID met Brexit on the ground before the war in Ukraine now met a Brexit on the ground. So there have been quite a number of issues that the British have had to swallow. So in terms of the Northern Ireland backstop, in fact, the Northern Ireland backstop put Boris Johnson at loggerheads with the rest of Europe because it meant him breaking the withdrawal agreement, which he said under the law he could, the Europeans said he couldn't. So how much of that do you think is feeding into this, and how much support can Liz Truss expect from her European colleagues, knowing fully well that she was a member of Boris Johnson's government and she backed this issue of withdrawing from the backstop?
Yeah, with regards to the Northern Ireland EU fiasco, I think if the European Union wants to be helpful to the UK as an ally, because take it or leave it, the United Kingdom is one of the largest economy in the world. The EU also needs the UK. So I think there will be a series of negotiations. The war in Ukraine and some internal issues bordering on the economy has been taking a lot of time. So negotiations will come in, and like I've discussed with some of my Irish friends here in the UK, and I always tell them that when you come to the negotiation table, you're not going to get everything you want. So you leave some and then you take some. So I believe that will be sorted out so that some of these internal battles that the Liz Truss premiership is facing will abate a little bit.
I must ask you about the battlefield itself. I mean, the war in Ukraine, which is creating more of the more immediate problems for both the government and the people. It does appear as if there's an escalation. When people were thinking that, well, perhaps, you know, there might be some lull, and then, as you pointed out, when you come to the negotiating table, you win some, you lose some, so that everybody walks away believing that they had something. It doesn't appear as if that's happening. In fact, there is now the talk of the use of nuclear weapons, and the EU is preparing, as we are told, its citizens for the possibility of that. The Russians already did, and the Ukrainians, at a point in the past, already also started handing out tablets in case. What's your view of this? What do you think? I mean, just as the war is hitting its 7-month mark, or 8th-month mark, rather, we are talking nuclear weapons.
Yeah, you are very right there. Like the war, the crisis has escalated, and this has come as a shock to the entire world. First was the gains that the Ukrainians were making, pushing the Russian artillery back, taking back territories, and then we had that threat from Russia, from Putin, when he said he's not taking off the use of nuclear weapons off the table. And then we have that, funny and bogus referendum, which the Russians had in the territories they control in the Ukraine, which the entire world condemned that. And then the attack on the bridge in Crimea, and then Russia have used that now as an excuse to be throwing missiles. Over 80 missiles have been thrown into Ukraine this week alone. And innocent people are being killed. Yesterday, the United Nations Human Rights Council, the chair, was speaking yesterday, and he said what Russia is doing is against international conventions. So this should be a military battle, should be a military issue. But just throwing missiles into Ukrainian cities, Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, Kyiv, even the capital, and the innocent people are just being killed. So this war has escalated, and to be honest, I must say that Russia have to be watched very well because with the way Vladimir Putin is going, he may actually use nuclear weapons, which will be taking the world back, ages. We just hope that this man will listen to the voice of reason, because he's just throwing missiles into Ukraine. And when you look at this crisis, Ukraine have not thrown anything into Russia. So they are just defending their territories. So this is a senseless and mindless war which should not have happened anyway. But a good thing that NATO, the US, the EU, there was even a meeting of the G7 2 days ago, where Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the Americans, had a meeting, and they've promised that they are with Ukraine all the way. And I really love the strong language of the NATO Secretary General yesterday, Jens Stoltenberg, when he said that it is Russia that will end this war. They started it. They have to end it. It is really appalling, the level of escalation that this war have turned into.
Indeed, Dr. Tony Agbons, senior lecturer at the Anglia Ruskin University in London, as always, thank you for your perspective and for your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ladi. Have a great day.
You too.